The Trump administration is planning to slash NASA's budget, but while it's doing so, it's also proposing a huge new Mars initiative funding over $1 billion more on Mars technology and exploration. We saw the beginnings of this Mars interest in President Trump during his first administration in the first couple of years. I did a video on that if you want to check that out. But then it sort of fizzled away as President Trump became more aware of the Artemis moon plans and became more aligned with Vice President Mike Pence and what he was thinking in terms of Artemis. But with no Mike Pence in the second Trump administration, Elon Musk took over as that major influence in President Trump's thinking, and therefore Mars is center stage. Some big items that we already knew were coming was canceling the Space Launch System SLS and the Orion capsule after Artemis 3. So Artemis 1 has already happened. Artemis 2 is currently scheduled for next year. Might actually happen next year, but I'm aiming for 2027. Artemis 3 is humans returning on the surface of the moon. And that is scheduled for 2028. I don't think it's going to happen in 2028 at all. I think it'll probably be 2029, 2030. We will see. After Artemis 3 comes this new Moon to Mars transportation system that I will go into. Also on the chopping block is the Lunar Gateway, which is a small space station that was planned around lunar orbit. If you want a full grasp of what was canceled or proposed to be canceled in the Trump administration's budget for FY 2026, I did an entire video on that. I left some things out upon second and third reading of the budget. I'm a little bit more upset than I was even during that video. But if you're interested in seeing all of the impacts on science and the International Space Station and other parts of Artemis, go ahead and check out that video. This video, I want to try to be more optimistic and look at Moon to Mars. For NASA's entire history, it has always wanted to do Moon, Mars, and beyond, but has never, ever put actual real money towards sending humans to Mars until this budget proposal. This is the very first time that any presidential administration has really said, we are going to go to Mars and we're going to put financial backing behind that. And I'm not talking about Mars rovers. Mars rovers have been extremely successful under NASA throughout the decades. I am talking about humans to Mars, what Elon Musk has dreamed about. And I did a video on his recent presentation at Starbase, Texas, where he talked about his vision to send starships to Mars. If you want to check that video out as well, it's linked above. So looking on the bright side of a very dismal future for NASA science and exploration, we do have this exciting new Mars initiative. I have always been a moon girl, but I appreciate the fact that Mars is not getting lip service here. We're not saying Artemis is a Moon to Mars program and then putting all of our focus and money and resources on the moon and ignoring Mars. This is actually, in this budget proposal, a Moon to Mars program. The numbers, the figures, they're a little bit difficult to discern because some things get moved around to different directorates. And so if you want to take a look at the actual budget, I have it linked it down below. You can piece together what got moved, what programs got moved and zeroed out in one area and then reinitiated in another area, and where the funding went. The commercial moon and Mars infrastructure and transportation overall budget line is $864.1 million for FY 2026. And so that covers a lot of these new Mars initiatives, and then budget actually increases quite a bit over the following years, the projected years. What they did, unsurprisingly, was look at the success of NASA's COTS program, that's the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services. Those were fixed price contracts that NASA started first for cargo delivery and then for human exploration delivery. Now the human exploration part, only one of the two was successful. Only SpaceX Crew Dragon was successful in delivering crew to the International Space Station. Boeing, unfortunately, has not yet proven that Starliner is successful. But we can see the success of Dragon and Cygnus delivering cargo to the ISS. Essentially, NASA buying services from the commercial space industry. Now, fixed price is not right for every single program, but it is widely believed to be a way to control the costs and provide actual incentive for the commercial partners to deliver on what they promise and to not waste taxpayer funding that it gets from NASA. There are several new Mars-related initiatives in this budget proposal. I'm just going to touch on the most important ones, or the newer ones, which is the establishment of a commercial Mars Payload Services program. This was something that NASA talked about years ago and even put out a solicitation to get industry feedback. And then the idea just sort of faded in the background. So we haven't heard about this for many years. And finally, it's coming into existence, modeled after the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, the CLPS program. CLPS has had a mixed track record, and I was a little bit worried personally that if we didn't see more successes this year, that CLPS would just be cut by Congress. The Blue Ghost mission by Firefly was a phenomenal success. And to me, that helped to buy CLPS more time so that Intuitive Machines and Astrobotic and others can actually have successful missions while the program is being funded. And I do believe if the Trump administration is backing a commercial Mars Payload Services, that they will continue to back a commercial lunar payload services, and hopefully Congress will as well. Also newly established and building upon existing HLS contracts. Existing contracts would be 2 SpaceX Starship HLS landings and I think only one Blue Moon landing. Starting with those 3 contracts, they want to add some kind of near-term entry, descent, and landing, EDL, for a human-sized lander on Mars. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. The budget does not go into detail about this. NASA is pretty good at doing EDL on Mars for Mars rovers. Human size, I mean, how much does that scale? I don't know. The Perseverance rover was fairly large, but not the size of a human lander. What we can do with these lunar contracts to prepare for Mars landing, I don't know, because it's such a different environment. The moon essentially does not have an atmosphere, whereas Mars does. The lunar gravity is lower compared to Mars. There's just going to be a lot of differences when you're talking about landing on the moon versus landing on Mars and what that entry, descent, landing would look like. I'm curious what they're going to do to take the data from these lunar landers and extrapolate to Mars EDL. They also want to establish a Mars communications relay service. It's a fantastic idea. I thought it was a great idea when NASA proposed a lunar relay service, a commercial lunar relay service around the moon. And it just makes perfect sense that we'd also want that same kind of infrastructure around Mars as well. And then it says initiation of activities to lay the groundwork for a commercial Mars suit. If you remember, NASA awarded 2 spacesuit contracts based on the technology that NASA had been working on for many years. They awarded it to Axiom and Collins. Collins backed out, so now Axiom, as far as I'm aware, is the only commercial contractor, along with probably subcontractors, working on spacesuits for both the International Space Station and future commercial space stations, as well as for the lunar surface. The lunar surface is quite a different environment than microgravity. It's got the abrasive regolith, and that's my specialty, so I can tell you that is quite the problem. It is going to be the biggest problem. Now, thinking about Mars suits, they're not going to be that different from lunar suits. In fact, the lunar environment, in my opinion, is much more hostile to suits than the Mars environment. The Mars environment at least has air, it has the wind, it's able to round out some of that regolith, whereas the Mars regolith is much more sharp and edged and jagged. It's much more problematic on the surface of the moon. Once Axiom develops a spacesuit that is suitable for the surface of the moon, it would be durable enough and good enough to do very, very little modification for the surface of Mars. Now, going back to that commercial Mars Payload Services contract, they want to do the first hosted payloads, which would be about $25 to $35 million each, targeting delivery in 2028. That is really soon. Do I think they're going to do that? No, I absolutely do not. Take a look at the NASA Commercial Lunar Payload Services. That program took a long time to ramp up. It took much longer than the people at NASA thought that it would. If you look at the initial timelines for CLPS, they thought the program was going to ramp up a lot sooner. And so we have to factor that into account here with the commercial Mars Payload Services. Even though they're aiming for 2028, there's going to be a ramp up period. CLPS might help prepare some of these providers for commercial Mars Payload Services if the providers are the same. There's no guarantee that they will be. If the providers are the same and they've been preparing lunar landers, then perhaps they don't need as much ramp up to prepare similar Mars landers. But it is quite a different technology to land on Mars. And so I don't really know what a realistic timeline might be. But 2028 is a bit too ambitious in my opinion, but it's kind of cool that they're aiming for it. Now that's a really, really small contract, 25 to 35 million. They're aiming for a $200 million contract to be awarded October 2026 for targeting 2030. That $200 million, by the way, that's the lifetime cost. That's not one mission, because that'd be a really good, decent mission. That's probably multiple providers. There are some existing Mars missions, such as Maven, which are targeted for cancellation under the current budget. And they talk about how some of these missions, a lot of the missions that they are targeting for cancellation or ending, are at a farther along in their life cycle. They are older missions. Maven is quite an older mission. It was launched in 2013. And so my initial thought is, why are they canceling existing missions that can provide and already are providing and have been providing valuable data on Mars to then ramp up a different Mars initiative? And I think it's probably premature, in my opinion, to cancel some of these existing missions that cost so very little to maintain. We're talking peanuts money, rounding numbers money to maintain these missions while we come up with the replacements. There's no replacement Maven, similar kind of thing that exists yet. So why not continue on with these science programs? And again, it goes back to my rant about how much science they're cutting in this budget proposal. But I think it's important, if we're going to go to these places, if we're going to go to the moon, if we're going to go to Mars, that we need to understand the science of these bodies before we go there. Are the moon and Mars just land? Is it just land for us to settle? Or do we want to understand this land and how we can work it before we even get there, so we can plan our technology around that? And as a scientist, I know I'm biased in one direction, and I'm hoping that Congress will step up and fund some of the science that is scheduled to be canceled. I don't see much hope in Mars sample return being resurrected at this point, given the troubles that it's had for years. But the more we understand the science of the places that we're going, the better prepared that we will be to be successful once we get there. Do I think that the Trump administration's new Moon to Mars transportation system and new initiatives are going to be fully funded at these exact levels in the way that the Trump administration thinks? No, not at all. No, I do not. I do remember the Obama administration. People have called me out for mirroring Trump and Obama. They're two very different presidents, but I'm telling you, it's so similar, because I remember the Constellation program being canceled and Obama coming in and wanting to do a Humans to Mars initiative and Congress not funding it. And that's how we got this Senate Bill to Launch System, SLS. And so I don't know if history will repeat, because I do not believe Congress is as strong right now as it was back then. I do believe, however, that there's going to be compromises when it comes to the final budget for NASA and for the rest of the federal government. NASA is not at all high priority when it comes to funding the federal government, as much as I would like it to be. But if you think that NASA is a high priority, I am asking you to contact your elected representatives, if you are an American, and tell them that NASA is important and what part of NASA is important to you. Oh, and I always forget to ask, I am doing these videos a lot, so go ahead and subscribe and you will be informed when I have a new video coming out.